Welcome to our Rubbish Dog special with myself, Alasdair Meldrum. This is the presentation I presented at the Resource in Scotland event on the 14th of November. So this is a slightly extended version of what I presented at the conference that I promised to share with a bit further information. If you are listening and would prefer to see the slides, please pop over to our YouTube channel where you'll be able to see the slides, and I'm afraid you'll be able to see my face as well. We'll get by that. So Resource in Scotland Conference, 14th November, organised for the industry, by the industry. So Chartered Institute of Waste Management, the Renewable Energy and Clean Technology Association, Resource Management Association Scotland, Environment Services Association, and the Local Authority Waste Managers Network. Starting off nice and easy, what I chatted about was Scotland's waste figures in terms of how much waste we produce in Scotland. Just real headline figures. So for the last 10 years, we've been bumping around between 10 and 11 million tonnes of waste per annum. So it's currently sitting about 10 million tonnes of waste per annum that we're producing. Scotland's got a population of approximately 5.5 million. So we're producing roughly 2 tonne per person. In terms of how that's split up, we've got construction and demolition for the last 10 years has been moving between 4 and 5 million tonnes. We've got commercial waste has declined from a high of 4 million down to just above 3 million. And household waste is pumping along approximately 2.5 million. In the last couple of years, it's been slightly below that. In terms of how we deal with that, over the last 10 years, waste energy has grown from almost zero up to approximately 1 million tonnes per annum. The amount of going to landfill has declined from 5 million down to less than 3 million, and recycling is bumping along about 6 million tonnes per annum. Pre-COVID, 2016, 2017, it was up as high as 7 million. So then I looked at the recycling figures for Scotland according to the SEPA waste data figures, and it looks like we were recycling between 5 and 6 million tonnes in Scotland, and about 1 million tonnes was being recycled elsewhere. But once I started looking at these figures, I started thinking, is that really correct? So from a waste management licence point of view, if you produce a bale of paper, card, metal or plastic, that's still considered waste until that material is received at the recycling facility. For example, the bale of paper going into the paper mill, it's only at that point it's no longer waste. So are we really counting the recycling figures properly, or are we counting things that have been baled up that are ready for recycling? So I suppose it's a question at what point we classify something as recycling. So in terms of the legislation, we're doing it at the point it goes into the recycling facility, but in terms of the recycling figures, we're doing it at the point of when it's baled and ready for collection. So that led me to dig a bit deeper into the figures and the information. And one of the things I found was 2017 Scotland's Waste Data Strategy, which there's a whole website set up, and it's really looking at how can we improve the data, how can we get better quality data for Scotland. Lots of good stuff in there, lots of good information, lots of good ideas, lots of good plans. Sadly, when I looked through the minutes for 2022, 23, 24, there didn't seem to be very much done. It's as if we've forgotten what we'd actually set out to do in 2017. And we seem to be looking at the digital waste tracking strategy, service, if you like, as being the thing that's going to sort everything out. But I'm not totally sure whether that will do it. And I suppose the other thing is thinking about who's actually responsible for the data. Is it Zero Waste Scotland? Is it SEPA? Is it Scottish Government? Is it industry? Who's actually responsible for gathering up the data and making sure we've got a good handle on the data? But anyway, as I was looking through, just by chance, Scottish Government and SEPA released the new figures, and according to the figures, we have record-breaking lows in terms of Scotland's figures. So we're, if you like, selectively picking information to make it look as if we're doing pretty well. And really, at the back of all this is we all know we can't improve what we don't measure. So it's really important that we get this data right. So that led me to a number of conclusions. The polite version I've put up on the screen here, and that is there are 3 kinds of lies: damn lies and statistics. And the less polite version, some of you in the room or some of the people at the conference, maybe I had make to them in the various phone calls I had. So if you delve a bit deeper into the recycling figures for Scotland, I've summarised them here, but we've got animal food and sludge and vegetable waste is about 1.5 million tonnes. We've got mineral waste from construction demolition is about 3 million tonnes. And then the remainder to make up the 6 million tonnes that we're recycling is made up of glass waste, metal waste, paper and card, plastic and wood waste. But this is probably where I started struggling and started phoning friends in the industry, people that knew stuff and so on. So if you look at the animal food, sludge and vegetable waste category, in Scotland there's about 200,000 tonne of PAS 100 compost produced, and there's about 500,000 tonnes, or just under about 450,000 tonnes of PAS 110 anaerobic digestate produced. So that takes us up to 648,000. But according to the figures, we're actually recycling 1,475,000. So we've almost got 1 million tonnes of material that's not actually been recycled by the proper definition. It's been deemed to be recovered, but the question really is, are we actually recovering the value for that material? Similar story when you look at mineral waste from construction demolition. The figure's over 3 million tonnes. I know from the wash plants and so on that have built, there's been a lot of investment in Scotland in wash plants. Lots of companies invested the money to wash the soil, produce sand, aggregate, and then produce a filter cake. So the sand and aggregate is sold back into the construction sector. The filter cake is generally used for restoration of sites. So you could view that as all being recycling. The problem is the capacity of these in Scotland is probably between 1.5 and 2 million tonnes. So again, we're over-recording the amount of material that's recycled in the construction sector, because we're up at 3 million. And then when you look at things like glass waste, most of glass waste is actually recycled in Scotland, so that's all okay. Metal waste, we're at 700,000 tonnes. The vast majority, all of that is actually exported for recycling, so it's not actually done in Scotland. All we've done is packaged it up. Paper and cardboard, 260,000 tonne. Again, most of that is exported to England and the Far East for recycling. So again, we're just packaged it up. Plastic waste, again, 84,000 tonne. We're not actually recycling that in Scotland. That's getting passed elsewhere. And in the wood waste, I actually really struggled to find figures for that, but we're probably looking at most of that is actually recycled in Scotland. So when you take that into account, what we've actually got recycled in Scotland in terms of the proper definition is 3 million tonnes, not 6 million tonnes. And then if you actually take into account what we're actually recycling in either the rest of the UK, Europe, or the Far East, it takes us up to 4 million tonnes. So basically, the recycling rate for Scotland is not 62.3% in terms of the proper definitions. It's actually as low as 30%. So I suppose the question I'm asking is that a big missed opportunity? Is that a 3 million tonne opportunity that we're not, because we've not got sight over it, are we really capturing the value of that material? Or are we thinking it's all been recycled, thinking it's all been dealt with, and in reality it's not? So just to summarise that, so Scotland's recycling rate at the moment, we're presenting it as 62.3%. We're actually only recycling, in terms of the proper definitions of recycling, 30% of that. We've then got another 10% is recycled in the rest of the UK or Europe or the rest of the world. So we've basically got 22.3% that's not really recycled. We're calling it recovered, but in reality it's not actually recycling. And I suppose the question I'm asking, is this a total lost opportunity? So let's have so that's the sort of headline figures in terms of overall waste. Let's delve a wee bit deeper into household waste. So as I said at the start, household waste has been bumping along at the 2.5 million tonnes of waste per annum. And what I'm going to look at is the MRF code of practice, the testing that we do on the dry mixed recyclate. I'm going to look at the doorstep recycling rate, and I'm going to look at the amount of recycling that's in residual waste. So let's first of all look at the MRF Code of Practice. If you look at the data, it actually started before 217, but the data was all over the place before that. So 216 to 223, we're looking at the non-target material, as in material we don't really want in there, that's still recycled, but it's not the right material. It's running about 6%. The non-recycled material, so that's contamination, things like the nappies and other things that shouldn't be there, is 12%. So we're really looking at a contamination rate of 18%. So as an industry, we're really happy that we're putting out recycling bins and 18% of it is contaminated. We can and we need to do much better. And then just to add into the mix, in some cases, we're looking at adding soft plastic into that mix to make that dry mix recycling even harder to sort. If we then look at the tonnages that are collected on doorsteps, so most councils in Scotland, residents will have multiple bins, and they'll have a residual waste bin, and then they'll have a number of recycling bins. So what we're managing to achieve at the moment is just over 600,000 tonnes. Again, it was up pre-COVID done that. And then we're achieving just over 300,000 tonnes of recycling happening at household waste recycling centre sites or material recovery sites. And when you multiply it up over Scotland, that leads to a recycling rate across Scotland of 43.5%. But when you actually work out what's been recycled at the doorstep, it's less than 30%. So in my case, I'm in South Ayrshire, I've got 6 bins, and I would say I was easily achieving maybe 70-75% recycling without any real fuss, just by using the bin system properly. But across Scotland, we're achieving 43.5%. And when you actually work it back to the doorstep, we're achieving less than 30%. So not exactly a high-performing recycling system. When you then look at the household residual waste composition, Zero Waste Scotland report in 2020 looked at the data. Only 19% of that residual waste bin is actually residual. The rest of it is recycle, paper, card, glass, and so on. And if you multiply it up using the Scotland tonnage figure, disposal rate of £130 a tonne, which is probably far too cheap, that gives a cost to Scotland in terms of disposing all this residual waste, either to landfill or waste energy, of £173 million. If, however, you looked at actually putting that recycle in the correct bins, the cost for disposal would go down to 64 million, and then there would be an income from the recycle of about 24 million. And again, you can argue with the figures I've used here in terms of whether it's the right rate, but ultimately it's not going to move that figure that much, So our total cost of the material placed in the right bins is £40 million. So there's a £130 million opportunity. There's also opportunities for getting new facilities built. There's some employment opportunities. There's huge opportunities in terms of carbon reduction. And I'm being really simple about this, but the way to do that is to actually get the public to use the bin system as it was designed and put the effort into the communication and getting that to happen. So in terms of household residual waste, it is very contaminated. When we do have the recycle, it is also very contaminated, and our actual collection rate is actually very poor. And I'll guarantee if we had the data, the 3 million tonnes of commercial waste we produce, we would have an almost identical problem with that as well. So in terms of this brief review, the data is not great. The data needs to improve. The waste sector needs to work together to help improve that data, and looking forward to the rest of the conference and further discussion and debate. If anybody's got any comments on what presented, quite happily to engage in a debate going forward. And just finally, thank you to all the people who helped me put the presentation together. And if you are interested in Rubbish Talk, please follow the Rubbish Talk social media. And finally, the references I've used for this presentation are the SEPA Waste Data Strategy, SEPA Waste Data, which is on their website. also used the waste composition of household waste at curbside 21 to 23, produced by Zero Waste Scotland, and also used annual report 223 compost biofertiliser certification scheme that was produced by RIA. So thank you for listening. Happy to get any feedback on our social media as always. Thank you.